Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. North Carolina education leaders have set their sights on improving education, yet their most essential resource for success, teachers, are hurting. For most of the past 5 years, the state has declared a shortage of nearly every type of teacher. That's getting in the way of meeting goals set forth in a plan to improve public education in the state. WRAL Education Insider Emily Walkenhorst recently wrote about the issue at WRAL.com, and she joins us today. Emily, welcome.
Good to be here.
Emily, the state is really under the gun to improve education, and its plans are framed by this high-profile lawsuit. So let's start by you just explaining what this lawsuit is and what it hopes to accomplish.
Right. So back in 1994, five school boards and some families who attended the school systems in those counties, they were lower wealth counties, sued and said basically they weren't getting the education that North Carolina's Constitution promises them. So we know it as the Leandro lawsuit, named for one of the original student plaintiffs who was a middle schooler in Hoke County at the time and named Rob Leandro. And so this Leandro lawsuit basically resulted in 2004, the state Supreme Court coming out and saying, hey, they heard evidence from Hoke County and they mostly focused on Hoke County, heard evidence from some other counties, and they said these students are not getting the education they need and said the state needs to fix it. They said, you figure out what you need to do, legislators weigh in, executive branch weigh in, but you figure it out. And, years and years went by, and it wasn't until early last year that there was actually a plan proposed in court, agreed upon by the parties to do something about it. And a big part of that plan is to basically provide a lot more teacher training, a lot more teacher pay, and just kind of try to shore up the profession.
How do teachers factor into the plan?
So research shows that teachers are a big part of student success. Teachers, school administrators, and then just kind of the students' backgrounds themselves, whether they have internet at home, things like that. But teachers are a big, big part of student success. So the plan basically is, we want to recruit more people into the profession. We want to expand North Carolina Teaching Fellows, which is smaller than it used to be. And we want to provide a lot more training and support for beginning teachers. And it also calls for higher pay for teachers. So that's what's in the plan. And then you also hear things from other people, other places, other ideas. But that's what's in the plan right now. And politically, more funding for teachers, more higher salaries has been favorable. We've seen some increase in that, though not necessarily to the extent in the plan. And we've seen some increases in funding for North Carolina Teaching Fellows, but not quite up to where the plan calls for.
Now, one of the things you reported on was the fact that it's a real challenge to keep and to attract teachers to the state. Why is that?
So when you talk to teachers and when you talk to experts, there are a number of theories. People have their own personal reasons for why they leave the profession. But a lot of the things you hear are very common. Burnout is a big reason people quit the teaching profession. One reason people maybe don't enter the teaching profession is just what they hear. They hear that salaries are really low. They think maybe it's, they can earn a lot more money doing something they don't think is this hard. Maybe they can get a job working a pretty regular, reliable 40 hours a week, maybe doing some kind of software engineering or something that maybe they perceive will not be as stressful. Every job has its stressors. Every job can be difficult. But there's this perception that teaching is just harder than a lot of other jobs that do end up paying more. And, we know that teachers, nearly all of them have bachelor's degrees, but they earn significantly less than other people who have bachelor's degrees. And people generally just know this. So that is one reason people don't get into the teaching profession. There are arguments that maybe that's a little bit misguided, like it's not, certain things people are worried about aren't as big of a deal, short lunch breaks or, limited bathroom breaks are, not maybe the stressor you think they will be, but pay ends up being a stressor for people, or just a lack of resources, feeling overwhelmed, and working just really, really long hours.
So what is the state doing to recruit and retain more teachers?
So there's not necessarily one comprehensive plan where the state has, been working on this. There are different things that people have pushed for, people pushing for higher teacher pay, or, a restoration of some of the North Carolina Teaching Fellows program. And so we have seen a restoration of that program, and it's gradually increasing, but it's not at the level it used to be. And that was really just meant to entice more people into the education profession and provide them with financial benefit, help with your tuition and student loans if you chose to go into the teaching profession, and you got even more training. And the hope being that you'll really hit the ground running once you're a teacher. So that's some of the things we've seen, but there's not necessarily a comprehensive plan that's fully in place and fully funded to make big changes.
And has the state had any luck with its retention and recruitment plan?
So there have been some increases in the last couple of years in terms of people enrolled in educator preparation programs. And that's a turnaround. We had been seeing a decline for a really long time. So some of that, we kind of had this dip, and now we're kind of going back up a little bit. And we'll see how that translates into people completing those programs, and we'll see if that sticks. But of course, recruitment is only one part of it. How do you retain people once they are actually employed as teachers in your school system? And we haven't necessarily seen big changes there. We still see several thousand people quitting every year. And so that's another piece of the puzzle.
Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll hear some of the stories from teachers on the ground. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL Education Insider Emily Walkenhorst about the role teachers play in improving public education in North Carolina. Emily, when you were reporting the story, you spoke with some new teachers. What did you learn from them, and what were their concerns?
So for this story, I spoke with 3 teachers from Edgecombe County Schools. They are the first teachers to complete the Scholar Teachers program that the school system set up a few years back, which basically kind of trains some of their early college, high school students to be teachers, gets them interested, gets them in the classroom, learning the basics of lesson plans. And then if they go to college, get an education degree, and return to the school system for 3 years, they'll get up to $30,000 in student loan reimbursement. And so this is a big program that the school district was really hoping could really draw a lot of teachers to the school system. They have around 20% turnover of their teachers each year, sometimes higher, sometimes lower. And so I talked to these 3 teachers about just what their experience has been like. I talked to them before the school year started and checked in on them once the school year had started. And, before the year started, they were nervous. They felt maybe they weren't totally prepared. And then once the school year started, they said it was really hard. They said that they were working 60-hour weeks, some less than that, some more than that, maybe a little bit less as the school year went on because they weren't having as many beginning teacher meetings. But they were just working long hours. They were working on Sundays to plan for the week ahead. They felt they just were not as prepared as they wanted to be. They had spent years going back to high school, training to be a teacher, and yet once they were finally in the classroom, they were overwhelmed. It was a whole nother ball game to be the only adult in the room teaching students. And they all said that they found teaching still to be rewarding, but that they were really anxious to gain some of the skills that they think some of their more experienced colleagues had. And they think they would really appreciate a little bit more mentorship and even a teaching assistant in the classroom, thinking they're working 60-hour weeks, but maybe they could work less than that if a teaching assistant could help them. And a teaching assistant could also help some students who are struggling, who they can't give necessarily as much attention to as they would like to. And one of the teachers I spoke to actually has already quit. She was teaching middle school, and that lasted a few weeks, and she just thought she wasn't making any kind of a difference. She wasn't connecting with these students. And she also said these students have seen a rotating cast of teachers throughout their educational experience. And, and then she just realized that she was just overwhelmed and felt like she wasn't making a difference. So she ended up taking on a different role in the school system. She works at an elementary school now where she works on a temporary program. It's just grant funded. And they basically, she pulls out students during the work day or during the school day to help them catch up on some of the things they're falling behind on. And she finds that rewarding. She doesn't work quite as many hours. It's more like 45 hours a week. And but she's open to getting back in the classroom, but she just felt like it was too much for her.
Why do you think, with the long hours, working on Sundays, comparatively low pay, why do you think teachers still do it?
So a lot of teachers don't do it. They quit, especially beginning teachers. That's where some of the highest turnover rates are. But a lot of people stick with it because they get a little bit more used to it. They gain a little bit more of a rhythm and a little bit more knowledge on how to do things, but they're still working really long hours a lot of the time. State surveys show a lot of these teachers are working 45, 50 hours, even really experienced ones. And it's just a lot to handle, especially if you've got, young kids at home. And, and a lot of teachers do. And, but they stick with it because it's something they find rewarding. They like working with kids. They love that feeling of a kid who's struggling with something, finally learning how to do something. That universally, what I hear is, I taught a child how to read and never looked back. And people stick with it for that, and they hope it gets better and they hope it gets easier. And obviously, some people realize it's not worth it anymore, but a lot of people are still going strong.
It's got to be pretty tough, I would imagine, for school administrators to have this revolving door of educators. How do they deal with it? What did you hear from them?
So school administrators are they're struggling too. Especially because they're not just hiring teachers; they're hiring for dozens of staff members, people who might turn over mid-school year or over the summer, and they're competing against other school systems. And a lot of them have told me they think the applicant pool for teachers is just shrinking. They're having to, they don't have as many choices among teachers anymore. One principal told me that she kind of just asks people if they're interested in teaching. Somebody who maybe doesn't have an education degree, maybe just graduated college, trying to figure out a career, and she'll try to, get them to be teachers. And so they're getting creative a little bit, and also just feeling the strain of needing to hire for all kinds of other positions, because it's not just teachers where there's a lot of turnover. So a lot of them want, they think higher pay is a big deal. A lot of administrators are former teachers who needed a salary increase. And so they think teachers need to be paid more. And, they like the idea of teacher leaders being kind of like this extra person to help other teachers, but they're not funded currently, for the most part, by the state. And so they'd like to see funding for that. and they'd like to see more programs designed to get more people in the pipeline. They really liked the North Carolina Teaching Fellows program, and they want to see that expand.
I know that the Leandro plan is still ongoing, or discussions around how or whether to implement it are ongoing. Can you just tell us roughly where it stands now, and also what's next for the teacher pipeline within that plan?
So this plan in the Leandro lawsuit is an 8-year plan. Technically, we're in year 3 of that plan, and the state Supreme Court in November ordered state executives to transfer the funds to fund years 2 and 3 of the plan. So basically, that was $1.75 billion, and the Supreme Court said you have to fund whatever you didn't fund for years 2 and 3. And so the Superior Court in Wake County, it's a business court judge, Michael Robinson. He will eventually set a hearing. He's currently just accepting briefs from people, I think, through January. And he will have a hearing where he determines how much money is truly left over from that. But you've also heard from state executives who still don't feel comfortable transferring that money because typically, or pretty much exclusively, how money transfers is the General Assembly appropriates funds. It certainly is not unusual for a court to order funding if, it's damages or, something like that. But this is a large sum of money, and executives have said they're not comfortable with it. So what's in that plan would be, I believe, more salary increases for teachers, some expansion of the North Carolina Teaching Fellows program. And a lot of it is also more funding for students from disadvantaged backgrounds or students with disabilities. And a lot of that funding is for personnel. So that's the status of that case. But most of the remaining years in that plan call for so much more money. And right now there's no court order saying years 4 through 8 have to be funded for it. There's, in theory, a precedent based on this latest Supreme Court ruling that this plan has to be funded, but lawmakers are resistant to it because they're saying we didn't create this plan and we don't agree with it.
Well, Emily, thank you for breaking it down for us. That's WRAL Education Insider Emily Walkenhorst. For her extensive article on the teacher pipeline, visit the education section of WRAL.com. And thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email that's waiting for you in your inbox every morning with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.